Hi, good evening. Welcome, everyone. I'm Amanda Garcia Snell. I'm the city's Chief Engagement Officer. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really glad that you're here. We wanted, before we get started, just a couple of pieces of housekeeping that I wanted to share with you. First, we want you to know uh, that you can reach the city of Portland by calling 311 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If you have questions or need to connect with someone at the city, help in many languages is one call away. Also, please know that this meeting is recorded and will be available on the city's webpage, portland.gov/budget. And we will be putting that link as well as other links into the chat for you throughout the evening, so you'll have that information. This evening's session is designed to explain how the city's budget works and how you can get involved. There are multiple ways to participate and learn more that you can also find on our webpage, which is portland.gov/budget/join. And again, we'll add that into the chat for you throughout the evening. So I also wanted to just recognize and thank any of the city councilors who are able to attend this evening and appreciate their support as we move through this first learning session and then launch our budget engagement process. So first we will have a budget presentation and then time for presenters to respond to questions, followed by a learning demonstration of the budget balancing tool, and then we will wrap up for the evening. You may submit questions at any time using the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. After the budget presentation, we'll have 30 minutes for staff to respond to your budget-related questions. And I'll go over this again when we get to the Q&A section, but if you'd like to submit questions now, you can click on the Q&A, type in which is at the bottom of your screen, type in your question, and staff will provide a typed response letting you know that the question was received. All budget-related questions will be included in the FAQ that will be posted later on the city's budget webpage, and some may be answered live this evening during the Q&A portion. You will see all questions from participants as they have been responded to. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Ruth Levine.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. And good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us virtually this evening. We're excited to hear your questions and to be able to launch a somewhat new version of our budget engagement work. We have been for the last few years kind of trying to change how we do budget engagement as the city's form of government has changed. And one of the things that we're trying to incorporate into that is more general purpose, sort of budget 101, introductory budget content, and learning sessions such as this one. And we are testing out some different ways of doing this. So tonight is the virtual way, and we'll be looking for additional venues to participate closely with community coming in the near future. One of the other exciting things about tonight is that we're looking at doing some of this learning in a little bit more of a participatory way, which is why we launched the budget engagement tool that Lillian, that my colleague, will go over in this session tonight. And so that's a new opportunity, a new tool that we've just launched. So that's exciting. I do want to recognize that we're in a very difficult fiscal environment at the city, and that there's a lot of information coming quickly, and it can be confusing, but it's really important to me, to our office, to the city, to develop a strong foundation for understanding with the general public around how the city's budget works, how you all can get involved, and how city council and the mayor are supporting budget decision making that is the best for the community, as good as it can be. And so It's really helpful for the city to have folks engaged in this process and to really dive in. There are some unique features of public budgeting that aren't always intuitive for folks who have managed a household budget or even a small business. And so I think this is intended to give you a feel for what public budgeting entails and what it's like to balance the budget for the city. I want to, and sorry, you can, let's see, advance the slides. Yeah, that's fine for now. Before we dive into the content here, I did want to say at the outset that this is just the beginning of our budget engagement over the next few months for the 26-27 budget development process. City Council, we know, will be hosting district-based budget engagement sessions, most likely, and we don't have all the details available yet on those, but we will be communicating and making sure anybody who's interested has that information and can participate with those. And that's really where folks are going to be invited to give more of their in-person sort of feedback to their counselors on their budget priorities. And we'll talk more. We also have a online budget feedback tool that you can use at any time to communicate your budget priorities, and those will be conveyed to the mayor and to city council as well. And so we'll make sure you have those links. So if you could go to the next slide. So the best place to find all the information is on our website at portland.gov/budget. There's a whole host of materials on there. The videos that I'm going to talk about in a second are on there, as well as written budget material. So I just, before I introduce the videos, I also wanted to recognize that this budget learning session and our budget engagement overall are evolving. And so we would love to hear feedback from you on how this feels. This is the first time we're sort of debuting these videos and this budget engagement tool. And so we would love to get your feedback on just how this is working as well. So this year we're piloting some new introduction to the budget videos to ensure that we have introductory materials about the budget in several different formats to match different needs and learning styles. And so we are going to show you these videos today. You can rewatch them on our website at any time or share them out with folks who aren't able to make it tonight. As Amanda said, this session will also be recorded and will be posted on our website. And we have written translations of the videos in multiple other languages that you can see on this slide. The last thing that I just want to say before we play the videos is there is on our milestones page on the portland.gov/budget website, there's a list of upcoming dates including city council meetings, work sessions, and other dates that folks may want to familiarize themselves with, which will include updates and additional information. So that's really the one-stop shop place to go. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the folks with the videos.
Welcome to Portland, Oregon. This video is part of a series explaining how the City of Portland's budget works. What is the city budget? You may sometimes hear about the City of Portland's budget from your neighbors or on the news, but what is the city's budget exactly? In your own household, you may budget to keep track of your income and help you plan how much to spend. In the same way, the city budget is the plan Portland uses to decide how much money it expects to receive and how those dollars will be used to serve the community every year. Unlike your household budget, though, the city budget has state laws it must abide by. The budget shows what the city can afford to do, how services are funded, and what priorities community members and city council want to invest in. The money that the city collects is called revenue, and the money spent to provide different services is called expenses. The city receives revenue from a variety of sources like property and business license taxes, water and sewer bills, and service fees. These public dollars pay for the city services that Portlanders rely on. Learning about the budget and taking part in the budget process helps community members share what matters most to them and have a voice in city decisions. The city's multi-billion-dollar budget covers 1 year from July 1st to June 30th. Utilities like clean drinking water, sewer, and stormwater treatment take up the largest share of the city's budget, followed by transportation networks including sidewalks, bike lanes, and road maintenance. Other major areas include public safety, such as police and fire, and parks, green spaces, and recreation, which serve families, businesses, and neighborhoods across Portland. Where does the city of Portland get its money? How can the city spend that money? In your household budget, you have to make choices about how to spend a limited amount of money. Some of your expenses are fixed or not easily changed. Things like housing, transportation, or medical costs. Other parts of your budget are more flexible, like entertainment, travel, or dining out. Cities work in a similar way. Each year, the city has a certain amount of revenue or income coming in. Through the budget process, city leaders decide how to use that money to keep the city running. The city receives two kinds of funding, restricted and unrestricted. City services are paid for by using a combination of both types of funds. Legally restricted funding, such as utility rates, transportation, and federal funds, are limited to certain types of uses. Unrestricted funding gives the city room to decide how the funds are spent. Most of the money the city receives is legally restricted, meaning it can only be spent on specific purposes. For example, Portlanders' water and sewer payments can only be used to provide water and sewer services, and vehicle registration fees can only be spent on roads. A small portion of city revenue is considered unrestricted, meaning it can be used more flexibly. Most of these unrestricted dollars go into what we call the general fund. The primary sources of that funding are property and business license taxes, along with utility and franchise fees. Another way the city receives funding is through service fees paid by residents, as well as state and federal grants, loans, and transfers from other sources, each with different levels of flexibility in how the money can be used. Unrestricted funds aren't always available when they're needed. Some city services, like police and parks, rely heavily on unrestricted funds. Because unrestricted funds are limited and already support many core services, keeping the budget balanced requires careful choices. When the cost of programs grows faster than revenues, the city must either reduce services or identify new sources of revenue. By law, the city's budget must be balanced every year. What does it mean to balance the city's budget? Oregon law requires Portland to balance its budget every year. That means the city cannot spend more money than it receives. If the city's revenue goes down, we must reduce costs, which can mean smaller programs, reduced grants, fewer staff, or cuts to services. If revenue goes up, the city can add or expand programs and services. Balancing the budget ensures the city is spending within its means. Just like in a household, when money is tight, you may need to adjust your budget and make trade-off decisions. For example, you may decide to lower your food spending to make the rent payment. City governments don't have that same flexibility. When a budget year brings in less revenue than was expected, the city has to make careful decisions about how to shift funding so essential services can continue. Through the budget process, leaders face tough trade-offs to keep the city's budget balanced. That might mean moving funds from one program to support another, or in some cases, reducing services that community members rely on. The budget process and how you can get involved. The city's multi-billion-dollar budget runs from July 1st to June 30th. Budget development for the next fiscal year begins every fall. Each year, the city begins by asking a simple question: how much money will we have, and how should we use it? The city budget office starts by estimating how much the city expects to receive and how much it will spend. The mayor then sets priorities for city services, with a focus on protecting programs that support Portlanders the most, especially people most affected by unfair systems. With that guidance in hand, city staff work with the city administrator to develop budget options. From those options, the mayor creates a proposed budget. By May 5th, the mayor shares the proposed budget with city council. Council reviews it, makes changes where needed, and approves a final budget that reflects both community needs and council priorities. City council has the final say, though the mayor may cast a tie-breaking vote if necessary. In June, City Council adopts the budget so it's ready to take effect on July 1st, when the new fiscal year begins. After July 1st, the city continues to monitor and adjust the budget throughout the following year. This technical process is called a supplemental budget. So where do community members fit into all of this? Well, early in the process, you can share what matters most to you. That might be through public comments, surveys, or budget education events designed to help you understand the choices ahead. Later on, as specific proposals take shape, there are more chances to weigh in through listening sessions, comment forums, and other opportunities to respond. All of this feedback is shared with City Council and city leadership to help guide their decisions. Community input plays a vital role in shaping the city's budget. Because resources are limited and needs are many, every budget requires thoughtful trade-offs. Your feedback helps city leaders make informed decisions about the services the city can provide. And every voice matters in shaping the services, investments, and priorities for the year ahead. Learn how to get involved and find additional information at portland.gov/budget. Thank you for watching.
Great, thank you, folks, for watching those videos, and we hope you enjoyed them. I am going to pass it over now to our city economist, Peter Holzman, because that was very high-level information generally about the budget, and Peter's going to give a very quick overview of where we are in the current fiscal year based on the general fund forecast, so not every single fund in the city. So I will pass it to Peter now.
Great. Could you skip ahead a slide or two? Perfect. This is great. So hi, I'm Peter Holzman, city economist. And first of all, just answer these questions that are on the slide. The first one being, why are there different funds? And that is because it is legally required to enhance transparency and better show what revenues are going where. And for example, the water rates paid go into a separate fund from property taxes, and this makes it clear what those revenues are paying for. How does the city use forecasts? Well, every forecast will include expenses and revenues and compare the two to see if there's a gap where reductions need to be made, or available revenue where council may add additional expenditures. While different funds have slightly different methodologies depending on their revenues, forecasts are an integral part of the budget process for every fund. When is the general fund forecast released? It is released in December, and this is typically the beginning of the budget process. It may be updated a couple of times throughout the process, but typically these changes are not huge. How is the general fund forecast determined? Well, the expense forecast is determined by taking spending that council has adopted and inflating it. And it has to be adopted as ongoing. And the typical rule of thumb is that something is deemed ongoing if it is a service that is unlikely to go away and involves people hired and trained for the job. Whereas one time is typically an expense that shouldn't necessarily need to happen again the following year, such as fixing a roof or a pilot program or some sort of capital expenditure. Recently, there's been some confusion over the expense forecast because during the pandemic, a number of programs were adopted on a one-time basis that councils renewed every year, essentially treating them as ongoing. And then here you can think about a number of the houselessness services that have started up in the past few years. On the revenue side, the general fund is where the majority of taxes, and these are separate from fees, go. These taxes tend to fluctuate more with economic performance, and thus there are different, more complicated models used for forecasting these revenue streams. While Portland's economic performance is important, another key aspect of the revenue forecast are changes to tax laws, and these changes could happen locally, at the state level, or at the federal level. For example, one big impact on the recent forecast were federal tax cuts that passed in July, and these tax cuts carried all the way down to our local business license tax. You can go to the next slide. So this is all of the city's external revenue. In the general fund, the majority of it comes from 5 sources that I'll talk about in more detail in the next slide. In the other funds, the largest are utility rates, which are fees and services, and there are fees and services. And then our largest taxes that are non-general fund taxes are the Clean Energy Surcharge, which is dedicated to the Portland Clean Energy and Community Benefits Fund, the Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Levy, the Children's Levy, and the Parks Levy, which just got renewed. One thing that might be confusing is that while the city budget is over $8 billion, the city is collecting closer to $2.1 billion in external revenue. The difference comes from the fact that when the city charges itself, say Fleet Services asks for money from the police bureau for car maintenance, that is counted towards the total budget, even though there's no additional external revenue involved. Additionally, the money held aside and not spent but carried into the next year is also counted towards the budget, but is not tied to an external revenue source. And then here you can think of when the Bureau of Environmental Services, which operates the sewer system, saves up money to do a massive public works project like the Big Pipe. Not every city budget's exactly like this, and it does add a level of transparency, but it does make city-to-city comparisons a little bit more difficult. You can go to the next slide. So this graph shows the 5 main revenue sources for the city's general fund, and I will talk about each of these, starting from the biggest going down to the smallest. The biggest are property taxes, which we collect roughly $350 million of. The property taxes that go to the city's general fund are roughly 20% of your tax bill. This is the other places your property tax bill go to are Portland Public Schools, the county, this general fund, Fire and Police Disability and Retirement Fund, Parks Local Option Levy, Children's Levy. But again, of all these, only about 20% goes to the city's general fund. And this is the largest revenue source, and it's very stable. Declines in property values in the downtown have significant impacts in terms of how much the revenue the city has received. Yet it is important to note that despite that, property tax revenue has still grown every year. The next biggest revenue source are business license taxes, and these are a 2.6% tax on net income of all businesses, large corporations and small pass-through entities alike. It is based on business activity, which can be measured in a number of ways, but is not necessarily directly tied to employment. So a large corporation with no employees in Portland may still pay a substantial tax if Portlanders buy enough of that product, or click on enough ads, or utilize their financial services, or any other form of business activity. And these are the second largest source, and very volatile, because not only is it impacted by economic performance of businesses at the national level and local level, but is also impacted by tax laws. As I mentioned previously, a large portion of the budget deficit that we will talk about is due to federal tax cuts that were passed in July. The third largest are utility license franchise fees. These are about a 5% tax on gross revenues of public and private local utilities. So think electricity, water, sewer, natural gas, telecommunications, and cable. These increased substantially over the past 3 years with the private utility rate increases, but are expected to moderate going forward. Transient lodgings fourth, they're way at the bottom there, make of a 720 some but $1 million budget, these collect about 25 million. So not a large portion of the revenue. But this is a 5% tax on hotels and short-term rentals is a good bellwether for economic performance in the city. And lately, especially post-pandemic, the revenue from this has struggled, largely due to lack of business travel, as well as, again, the larger economic performance of Portland. And then finally, state shared revenue. These are taxes collected by the state related to liquor, cannabis, and cigarettes, and then remitted back to all the cities within the state. It's declined from about 25 million a few years ago to about 20 million in the current fiscal year. And this is largely due to changes in state legislation. And it is not really expected to grow going forward. Next slide, please. This slide shows the 5-year forecast for both expenses and revenues. As I mentioned in the last slide, pretty much every revenue stream is facing significant headwinds, and there's a significant gap in the upcoming budget year of $66.9 million. Notably, this does not include any of the expenses that council has approved only on a one-time basis, but may want to continue. A detailed explanation of the forecast and what is driving the shape of this chart is it's included in that leak below the graph. And that's all I have. So please let me know if there's any questions. Thank you for your time. So one question I see is about the general fund. Can I explain a little bit more about what it is used for at the city of Portland? As was mentioned in the video, these are unrestricted and unrestricted funds, and they're primarily used to support police, fire, parks, and a whole slew of other city services that don't have a restricted funding source. And I can let Ruth add to.
Yeah, thank you. And just for folks who are listening, feel free to drop any questions in the chat and we'll try to get to them as they come now. So yes, the general fund, the sort of largest buckets of services that are paid for with general fund resources are in public safety, so fire, police, 911, and community safety, as well as followed by parks. And then there's a grouping in community and economic development around affordable housing and economic development. And then there's also a significant amount in sort of overhead type services that serve everyone in the entire city. Those are paid for by a mix of general fund and other resources. And then after that, there are kind of groupings of different smaller programs that are funded by the general fund.
I saw a question on the graph on the last page, and we can pull that up again if we can go back one slide. The ongoing expenses are higher than the revenues for the first 3 years of the forecast, By the end of the 5-year forecast, revenues do climb above expenses, largely related to some debt falling off of the expense side of it. However, we have to balance the budget for next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 26-27, which is where that red line is $66.9 million above the green line.
And the one thing to add also to that is that the out year expenditures, so as you get further to the right in that with that red line, are really only it's only including sort of baseline inflation on existing known expenses. It doesn't include things like new labor bargaining contracts, significant changes in health benefits that rise above the rate of inflation or the like, or any policy changes that might be made by a city council to either add new programming or, do something else that might cost additional money. And so it's pretty uncertain what that 5th year will look like. And so to Peter's, we do a 5-year forecast at the city of Portland. In part, it helps to sort of smooth the changes over time so that you're not making wild changes every year because some of them have already been incorporated. But in this particular forecast, the next fiscal year is the one that really matters in terms of what we're balancing to in the budget this year. I see a question about engagement in the remainder of the budget process, and whether folks are providing feedback on individual line items or broader policy goals or both. That's a great question. And I think the answer is both. The idea is that early in the process, as not all of the individual line items have been surfaced or are known, there's a lot of work behind the scenes to figure out what those individual line items could be. That it's helpful for community members to be providing higher level policy feedback. Like, it's really important to me to see this service maintained in my area, or like it, and less focused on a specific program. And then as we get deeper into the process, especially once the mayor's proposed has come out, there will be hundreds of individual line items sort of on the table for council to consider and to make amendments to. And at that point, I expect that there will be a lot more opportunities to weigh in on specific changes that are being discussed within the budget. I see a question about SDC revenue that I think we may need to answer offline, get a little bit more detail about that one. I'll pause for a minute.
Okay, so those are the questions that we currently have. Feel free to continue to add questions into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And at this moment, we'll move on to a demonstration of the tool, and I'll pass it over to Lillian Nguyen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lillian Nguyen, and I am an analyst in the City Budget Office. I apologize, but I don't think my video is showing up for attendees. But thank you for joining tonight. I'm here today to show you a tool that we are piloting for fiscal year 26-27, which we're calling the balancing tool. This tool is meant to provide you with a hands-on way to explore potential budget priorities and trade-offs as the city enters a challenging fiscal year. It allows you to adjust the general fund discretionary funding levels for bureaus and offices to try to get to try to get the city to a balanced budget. It's also intended to help you get a feel for the size of the deficit relative to the bureaus and offices that could be impacted. So I did want to provide some caveats. This tool shows high-level numbers and does not reflect actual scenarios. Also, it doesn't reflect the actual impacts, the actual service impacts of any budget adjustments. Okay. With that, I am going to now pull up the tool on my screen and walk you through it. Okay, so this is the landing page of the tool, the budget introduction page. On the left-hand side, we introduce the concepts around the general fund discretionary dollars and the deficit, both of which have already been discussed today. On the right-hand side of the landing page, we provide links on how to continue engaging with the budget process. So first, we have a link to our Join the Fiscal 26-27 budget development page, where we provide updated information on events and other ways to provide input. Next, we have a link to the Introduction to the Budget page, which has the videos that we showed earlier today, as well as some written explanations of some basic concepts. And finally, we have links to a form where you can tell the city what your budget priorities are at this early stage in the budget process. So going over to the second page, the how to use this tool page is a small scale example of the tool so you can understand how it works. So the city that we're going to try to balance on this page is a very small city called Sample City. Sample City consists of two bureaus, the Bureau of Socks and the Bureau of Shirts, and has a total city budget of $6 million. So you can see in the table here that the Bureau of Socks is slightly larger with a budget of $4 million, and the Bureau of Shirts has a budget of $2 million. As you might notice from the bar chart above, there are total revenues for the city of $5 million, meaning that there is a $1 million deficit in Sample City. You can track that balance in the upper right-hand corner, which will kind of let you keep an eye on what the overall city balance is. So for Sample City, we can adjust the general fund discretionary budgets for each of those bureaus by dragging this slider. So I'm just going to drag these sliders to the right, and you can see that the tables and the chart and the balance tracker change as we make adjustments. So again, you'll want to kind of pay attention to the upper right-hand corner to track the citywide balance. So you can play around and explore different ways to balance the funding. So here is a possible balance scenario where we prioritize the Bureau of Shirts but decrease the Bureau of Socks to arrive at a balanced budget. In addition to these balancing functions, I wanted to point you to the programs list, which is on the same card where you make the adjustment. At the bottom here, I know it's quite small. So this list gives you a sense of the work that's being done with general fund discretionary dollars within each bureau. There's also a gray button, which is currently disabled, but will become active around February 17th. That will link you to the budget documents for each of these bureaus. So you'll be able to read more about the bureau programs in the budget documents when they're available next week. Okay, so that's the basics of the tool, and I'm going to dive into the actual tool now. So on the citywide summary page, we see the city of Portland now, no longer Sample City. And because the city of Portland is significantly bigger than Sample City, we had to put the adjustments, the sliders, on multiple pages, which we break out by the city's larger organizational units, which are called service areas. So the remaining pages at the top here, if you can see my mouse, these are the service area pages with the adjustment sliders. So this summary page gives you an overview of all of the service area budgets and your adjustments to them. You can navigate to an individual service area page, make your changes there, and then come back to the summary page in order to see the bigger picture of how all of your adjustments are coming together. So I'm going to click into a service area page, but the format of the rest of the service area pages should be the same or very similar. So this should look familiar. There are some elements that you've already seen, but we had to fit a lot more information onto these pages, so things are moved around a little bit. So I'll just spend a minute orienting you to this page. So the chart is shown by default, but you can switch to a table view if you prefer. There are these two buttons here for you to do that. Also, I wanted to point your attention to the reset button in the kind of upper middle of the page. So you can make your adjustments. For instance, I'm making one now. You can see that that adjustment is reflected here. And then you can see that the adjusted balance has changed with that adjustment. And if you decide that you need to start over, you can reset everything back to its current funding level by clicking the reset button, and that'll give you a fresh start on this page. So again, I don't think I have said this out loud, but it's written on the tool that the options for funding adjustment are keeping the funding as is, which is at 100%. You can go all the way up to doubling the funding at 200%, or you can remove all funding by selecting 0%. So I'll make that change again, and then we'll navigate back to the citywide summary page. And you can see that change that we made to the city budget office's budget is reflected within the city operations service area on the summary page. That is my demonstration of the tool. I just wanted to note that this tool works best on a computer, but it may work on a large tablet, but it is not optimized for mobile, so it probably won't be very usable on your phone. It might be a little slow to load or to show your changes when you make an adjustment, but it should work after a second or two. We'll be looking at some options to see if we can make the tool more responsive. But if you have any issues or questions or suggestions, please feel free to email citybudgetoffice@portlandoregon.gov and we'll try to address them. And that's it for now. So please, if you have any questions about the tool in this session, you can submit them through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian, for that, and thank you, Ruth and Peter, for the budget overview. And we'll give a couple of minutes in case folks are popping questions into the Q&A function to see if there are additional questions about the budget or the information that Ruth and Peter shared, or any questions about the tool. I'll remind folks again that the Q&A function is at the bottom of the screen, and so you can click on that and you can type a question in. Additionally, this session has been recorded, is being recorded, and we will make sure that it's available on the budget website, which we'll put that link again in the chat for anyone that may have joined later, or just to help you be able to find it. Additionally, if you have comments that you would like to share with the budget office, or in general around the budget, or specific around the budget, we will add that link into the chat again. We added it earlier in the evening, but add it again so that you can provide comments directly into that form. All of those comments will be captured and shared with city councilors and city leadership. So I'm just going to give a minute here and see if we have any questions.
And just one other thing to add, if folks have questions after this Q&A, after this session ends, you have more questions that you would like to add to our Q&A, we're going to drop an email address into the chat for citybudgetoffice@portlandoregon.gov, and you can feel free to go ahead and send them there. You can also always reach out through 311, and that will get routed to us as well. So either way will work. It's just what works best for you. And I'm seeing a question in the chat about the tool assumes static expenses and revenues. In real life, those values are changing all the time. And how do you account for real-time variability? Yeah, great question. So the data that the tool is based on is essentially a snapshot, a point in time of the budget. From sort of where we started the budget development process for fiscal year 26-27. So by the time we get to the mayor's proposed, those values will have changed. By the time we get to the adopted budget, those values will have changed again. So you're correct that those numbers will change. We will update the data sort of when it's feasible throughout the process this year so that it reflects the most up-to-date data, likely not before the mayor's proposed. So that is true. I mean, the other thing to just point out is that the budget itself is a bit of a snapshot. Every year we adopt the budget for the next year, and then the revenues and expenses come in at values that are always different than what we budgeted, almost entirely. And the goal is that we get them reasonably close. And then that's the other reason we have those supplemental budgets that was mentioned in the video, so that we can adjust the budget throughout the course of the year with the goal that the budget should reflect reality in the best way we can at any given time. But it is always true that there is going to be some variability between what we put in the budget and what actual revenues and expenses come in at in real life.
Okay, thank you, Ruth, for that. So at this point in the evening, we don't have any additional questions that I'm seeing. I'm just checking here. So that will end our time together. And I just want to say that we really appreciate so many of you taking the time this evening to learn about the complexities of the city's budget process. Again, your questions and feedback are important and will help shape how we share information and improve future tools. Budget comment and testimony are, again, can be taken through that link in the, that will be added one more time here in the chat for the online form. This meeting will be posted on the city's website at portland.gov/budget for you to share with your friends, neighbors, and interest groups, or to review and then add additional questions if you have any. Additional opportunities for in-depth conversation in the districts will be coming this spring. And again, there are multiple ways to participate and learn, and you can find those, the most recent budget information on the city's budget webpage, portland.gov/budget. Please consider signing up for Rose City Connection to stay up to date with all city news and events, including the budget process. I'll just pause 1 second because it seems we may have an additional question.
Went ahead and answered that last question in the chat. I can speak to it for the sake of the recording. The question is, why have expenses grown from 739 million to 796? And the reason for that is those are just sort of taking the adopted budget from last year and inflating it into next year. And those inflation factors are based on sort of national data for the most part around what the increases, what inflation does to increase costs. So it includes things like cost of living adjustments on salaries, health benefit cost increases in the cost of materials, software, cars, all of that is baked into those increase in costs.
I believe that's it for our budget questions. And can we just make sure to get the link to the budget page in the chat for folks so that they can have one final opportunity to click that link and see the latest and greatest of budget information on the city's budget page. That's also where you can find the opportunity to provide input, where you can find other engagement opportunities as they're coming. I'm sure that's the right link. Okay, and thank you so much for your time, and we hope you all have a lovely evening.